sanctions. We all remember what that feels like. It used to be that we got a significant percentage of our oil and gas from the Gulf offshore. So every time a hurricane would come through, prices would explode. But then we got to about 2009, 2010, and by then shale was producing more than half of the natural gas that Americans used. And when that happened, the price smoothed out and stayed low. Not bad. If you're from Texas, this is your fault. That spike there is when it got cold in Texas last winter, and natural gas and oil and electricity and hydro and nuclear, it all failed on the same day. And as a result, we saw the price spike. And then here is where we are now. So when people are bitching about energy inflation in the United States, this is what we're bitching about. Well below the historical average. It's just that it's above the shale era average. Now we are seeing more operating in American shale. It's incrementally increased throughout the winter, and we were very close pre-Ukraine to being back to what we were kind of expecting at sub $4 prices. I'm not sure we're going to get there, but I do think because it's easier, let me rephrase that. It takes 3 to 8 years to bring a conventional oil or natural gas field online. In shale, it only takes 3 to 8 weeks because the United States has a lot of legacy infrastructure for transport. Our population centers are close to where the production is, and the technology of it allows for a lot faster development because you're not going after a really huge spot that you can stick a straw in. There's no big pool in shale. You know you have to drill down. You know you have to drill horizontally. You know you have to frack. And we've now made that an industrial process. So 3 to 8 weeks for bringing new stuff online is really no problem. But you can't do that anywhere else. So this is our price structure, and here are the Europeans and the Asians. They're already dealing with with natural gas prices that are 4 to 7 times what they are here. And because it takes 3 to 8 years to develop new fields, and because the Russian stuff is going offline, you should expect this to, at a bare minimum, triple over the course of the next couple of months. And based on when attacks start happening on the infrastructure, it could be a lot sooner than that. Liquefied natural gas is about to get really exciting because that's really the only option for the Europeans. I mean, you can imagine the French working with the Algerians a little bit more better and a little bit more closely, but again, 3 to 8 years. You can imagine the Italians going into Italy to try to get more oil and natural gas out of that, but that's 3 to 8 years plus, a chaos factor. But if you cut Russia out of the system, the only option for the Europeans is just to go to a different continent and source LNG cargoes. And there is not enough spare capacity on the planet to supply what is necessary. So the Europeans are on their own here. There's not a lot that the United States can do. Yes, we do have LNG. Yes, we can send them some, but any that we send to Europe is LNG that we are not sending somewhere else. So until the end of the winter, the US can take the sting out of it. Fuel switching in Japan can take the sting out of it. But once it sinks in over this summer that the Russian stuff is never coming back, there's going to be a fight for what can be accessed. And let's give you an idea of how that's going to play out. This is an oil transport graphic that we pulled from the new book that publishes in June. The thicker the lines, the more tankers are plying that route. Pretty straightforward. We know that Urals is going to go away completely, but we also know that the United States crude exports are going to go away completely. If you melon scoop 5 million barrels a day of Russian crude out of the market, forget $100, forget $150. If we're at 200, we're very, very lucky. And there is no way that a president as populist as Biden will tolerate that if he has options. There's no way he will subject the American population to $200 oil if he doesn't have to. And he doesn't. Because in the 2015 omnibus bill, the US president has the authority to summarily suspend all crude oil exports. So once it really sinks in that the Russian stuff is not coming back, and this is not just a 2-month price spike, I fully expect Biden to ban exports again, trapping that crude in the United States. Now, it's not perfect. Light shale is something we have exported at a premium, and the American refining complex was designed around importing heavy sour. So the American refining complex is going to have to go through some serious retooling, and I expect like exemption after exemption after exemption to be signed by the White House to bring in individual crude streams, probably from the Saudis in the short term. But the heavy crudes that the American system was designed for just aren't there. Venezuela was a big supplier, it's gone. Biden's decision to kill Keystone limits what the Canadians can bring in. And if Keystone was like resurrected the day that Biden does this, you're still talking about a couple of years before the pipeline is built and operational. This has to be done now, and the refiners don't have a choice. It's not nearly the scale of problem that the Europeans are going to deal with, but it is something we're going to have some problems with here, because those middle distillates like gasoline, that's 40% of our energy demand. There's no way we're going to make that adjustment smoothly. But at least in the United States, it's not an abject shortage of the black stuff in the first place. US shale will try to expand. High prices, of course they will. Biden might even get out of the way a little bit. But the fastest US shale has ever expanded output is about 2 million barrels per day per year. So you're talking a bare minimum, if it's just the US helping here, 2 years before this really gets fixed. And then still, it's difficult to see US shale producers going gung-ho if there's an oil export ban in place. So the world has to get used to Russian crude and American crude vanishing at the same time. Ugh. West Africa is also going to come into play, because if you're European, and American crude is gone and Russian crude is gone, these are all former European colonies. The Europeans have linguistic, political, military, strategic, economic links to all of them. There's going to be some very heavy conversations that are very one way, with the Europeans demanding that the energy that flows out of West Africa no longer go to East Asia, because the Europeans are proximate and they can do something about it if they really have to. So I expect the broad scale redirection of all West African crude north to Europe. Here are a couple of graphics from Absent Superpower that we have updated. So thank you to Michael and Quinn for turning this around so fast. I know how much of a bitch this one was, but you can see what the flows are. So starting on the right, everything that is in yellow is something that is going to be redirected from Western Africa going to Europe. So all told, you're talking about 2.5 million barrels of flows. If you're on the left, it's a much more complicated graphic, because the Americans are crude exporters in this market already. Everything again in yellow is something that is no longer going